Since US President Donald Trump began his second term in office, his administration has been fairly clear about its stance in relation to Europe. In short, the continent has been too dependent on American military support for too long, and this needs to change, particularly as the United States clearly has ambitions to have a more dominant presence in the Western Hemisphere, while also freeing up troops for any conflicts that may arise in the Asia-Pacific. And while Europe as a whole is doing what it can to face this drastic change head-on, it's a huge shift taking place in a relatively short amount of time. While some European nations are confident that they can fill the gap left by departing US forces, other smaller nations have made it clear that they would like to continue having an American force presence in their territory. We are, of course, talking about the Baltics. Let's take a look at the situation for today's video. Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, the three nations that are collectively referred to as the Baltic states. The countries, throughout their struggle to regain independence from the Soviet Union in the 1980s, have maintained a fairly close relationship with the United States, particularly with American leaders supporting Baltic independence and US forces helping to modernize Baltic militaries in the turbulent post-Soviet 1990s. Indeed, US service members, through early partnership programs, deployed to the Baltic states to help get forces up to Western standards with the goal of joining NATO, an accomplishment achieved in March 2004. Many Americans without Baltic ancestry may not know about or even care about the Baltics. And as is naturally the case, there are some citizens and residents in the Baltics that are of the mindset that an American military presence isn't needed in their territory. However, we can see that military and government leaders of Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia remain strongly in favor of a continued US presence, despite the big-picture goal of a US drawdown across Europe. For now, the Baltics can rest assured that American forces will remain. The most recent news regarding support in this region came in early February when US Congress approved $200 million in security assistance for the Baltic states. As reported by LRT, the funding was part of the fiscal year 2026 Defense Appropriations Act, an act which secures continued US backing for Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania under the Baltic Security Initiative, or BSI. The $838.7 billion defense package signed by President Donald Trump on February 3rd guarantees funding for security cooperation with Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, despite earlier attempts inside the Pentagon to eliminate it. LRT adds that another $10 million was allocated to Estonia through the Foreign Military Financing Program under the Overseas Missions Budget, funding that Tallinn previously accessed to acquire HIMARS ammunition, Javelin missiles, and large-caliber artillery shells. Republican Congressman Don Bacon was quoted as saying, "Congress is committed to a strong NATO alliance, and we know that extra emphasis is needed in regard to the Baltics. Most in Congress are committed to NATO and know we need friends to counter China, Russia, and Iran. We cannot do it alone. America alone is America weaker." As we noted in a previous video, now only available to our channel members, American troops continue to be stationed across the Baltics and Poland. Over the past decade or so, US forces have been intermittently stationed in Lithuania on a rotational basis since the spring of 2014, with heavy battalions deployed since 2019. The Baltic Sentinel adds that the US battalion stationed in Lithuania was reinforced with an artillery unit in 2022, and there are currently more than 1,000 US troops in Lithuania. Our earlier research indicates that there's an armored cavalry squadron based at Camp Reido in southern Estonia, while there's an artillery battery in Latvia stationed at Camp Ādaži. The fact of the matter is that the military forces of each nation remain relatively small compared to other European countries and most definitely compared to Russia, even with the bear in a weakened state. Our guess is that even if NATO multinational units could be upsized to compensate for a complete American withdrawal from the region, the Baltics see a US presence as a much stronger deterrent, particularly as a tripwire force that would ultimately attract the full force of the US military should any attempt at a Russian invasion take place. The Baltic states have done what they can to encourage a continued US presence. While there's probably no official source that would admit it, we're guessing that major US arms purchases go a long way in remaining on good terms with the Americans. All three countries have purchased HIMARS rocket artillery systems, while Lithuania has purchased about 500,000 American-made JLTVs, or Joint Light Tactical Vehicles. Lithuania and Latvia have somewhat recently purchased Black Hawk helicopters as well. And yes, some of this equipment is subsidized by US government defense spending packages, but the Baltic governments pay the rest, and such deals exist to ultimately support America's massive defense industry. Most recently, new military infrastructure was developed in Pabrade for the US forces in Lithuania. Improving living standards for stationed American service members, the new infrastructure includes 3 buildings of barracks, a multifunctional facility with a gym, classrooms, mess halls, a technical maintenance area, helipads, and more. But while an American military presence on NATO's eastern flank continues to have bipartisan support in US government, politics and rhetoric at the highest levels may trump all the hard work being done to keep all those Abrams, Bradleys, and Paladins in the Baltics. Without any nuance or closer examination of the finer details of the situation, or perhaps even feeling that Russia may not actually be the threat that some believe it to be, President Trump and his advisors may just insist that American forces leave the region, something that the Baltic states should have in the back of their minds whilst preparing a Plan B. And that leads us to the last part of our video. Is there a Plan B if US forces leave? Is there another plan if NATO collapses? LRT reports that some political parties are now in a, quote, apocalyptic mood and that everyone is worried. Indeed, LRT interviewed 5 former and serving senior officials as well as prominent members of the country's main political parties, all of them speaking on the condition of anonymity due to the sensitive nature of the topics. It's reported that Lithuanian officials say no one is closely informed about the developments in Washington, adding that a similar mood is felt in other European capitals too. In a recent interview published by Delphi, Lithuania's Prime Minister says that her country does indeed have a, quote, Plan B and Plan C in case NATO collapses. In the interview, she said, "We had mobilization plans, we discussed what is happening, we must always have a Plan B with the possibility that we suddenly remain alone in the world. We see a changing environment. There is no mythical security dome. We have to build it ourselves." One politician, when asked to respond to this, stated, "Within the government there are more people who understand that without America it is impossible to defend ourselves," as NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte told the European Parliament. The individual goes on saying, "But there are also voices saying that Europe should build alternative capabilities and somehow think about what we would do without America. We must strengthen our capabilities in any case, but in the next few years we cannot do without the US, so giving in to emotions is irrational." Another official admits that the Baltics simply can't do without the Americans at the moment, saying, "I know this at the technical level, intelligence, satellites, troop numbers. It just doesn't exist." So that's the dilemma hanging over the small nations of the Baltics. Unfortunately, some doubt NATO's resolve to defend every inch of alliance territory, something that was even woven into a war game, whose results were recently published. The simulation, conducted by Die Welt in collaboration with the Bundeswehr University in Hamburg, involved current and former German military officers, politicians, and decision-makers. As reported by LRT, the scenario describes Moscow sending a humanitarian convoy to Kaliningrad to address a fabricated humanitarian crisis. The convoy travels through the so-called Suwałki Gap, followed by Russian troops. In this war game, the German brigade stationed in Lithuania is portrayed as ineffective, while US and NATO forces hesitate as they are unwilling to risk a third world war. The unfortunate outcome was that Russia managed to capture one of Lithuania's key cities with just 12,000 troops, despite action from the Lithuanian armed forces. Now, it should be obvious that war games should not be considered destiny and a guaranteed outcome. Indeed, experts are skeptical about the simulation's outcome, which seems to ignore early warnings and intelligence reporting, allowing Allied forces to react early. One commentator says that such wargame scenarios are primarily aimed at Western elites and societies in an effort to jolt them awake, which may explain the limited role assigned to the Baltic states. Clearly, there is a lot to think about with the complex situation in the region. But what do you think of the current and ongoing situation in the Baltics and relations with the United States? Is there enough political gravity in Washington to keep US forces stationed in Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania? What kinds of Plan Bs would you envision as being suitable alternatives? Let us know your thoughts by leaving a comment.